The crystal chandeliers caught light like trapped stars, scattering diamonds across the marble floor of the Grand View ballroom. 500 guests in tuxedos and gowns moved through the space like a choreographed dream, champagne flutes glinting, laughter rising in polished waves. Amara balanced a silver tray of canapés on her palm, weaving through the crowd with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned to take up no space at all. She wore a crisp white shirt tucked into black slacks, her hair pulled back tight. The uniform made her a ghost. People's eyes slid past her as if she were furniture. A woman's voice cut through the ambient noise. "Excuse me." "You there?" Amara turned. A woman in her 60s stood near the champagne fountain, draped in pearls that probably cost more than Amara's entire year of rent. Her silver hair was sculpted into an elaborate updo. Her dress shimmered deep burgundy, but her eyes held something cold and sharp. "Yes, ma'am." Amara's voice stayed neutral, professional. The woman, Vivian Harlow, according to the name tag on the nearby donation table, wrinkled her nose as if smelling something unpleasant. "Do you even understand what we're celebrating here tonight? Culture, art, refinement?" She plucked a champagne flute from Amara's tray with 2 fingers, as if afraid of contamination. Amara felt her jaw tighten. "The Chen Foundation Gala for the Arts, ma'am." "How lovely that you can read." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. She turned to the cluster of women beside her. "The quality of staff has really declined, hasn't it? I suppose we should be grateful they showed up at all." Heat crawled up Amara's neck. She started to turn away. Then Vivian's hand moved. Deliberate, precise. The champagne flute tipped, and golden liquid splashed across Amara's white shirt, spreading like a stain across fresh snow. The conversations around them stopped. Heads turned. Vivian's mouth formed a perfect O of false surprise. "Oh my, how clumsy of me. Perhaps you should stick to simpler work, dear. Something more suited to your capabilities." The ballroom held its breath. Amara stood frozen, champagne dripping from her shirt onto the marble. Her hands trembled at her sides. Every instinct screamed to apologize, to disappear, to do what they expected. But something else rose in her chest, something that had been building for 28 years of being invisible, being dismissed, being told she didn't belong in spaces like this. She looked up at the chandeliers, the gilded ceiling, the oil paintings of composers lining the walls. Her mother's voice whispered through memory, "Your voice is your truth, baby." Amara opened her mouth. The first note of Nessun Dorma escaped her lips like a bird released from a cage. 6 hours earlier, Amara's alarm screamed at 4:30 in the morning. She slapped it silent and stared at the ceiling of her studio apartment, where a water stain had formed the shape of Italy. Poetic, she'd always thought, given what she kept hidden inside her. The apartment was tiny, barely 300 square feet in a building that groaned and creaked like an old ship. But the walls were covered in opera posters. Maria Callas in Tosca, Leontine Price in Aida, Renée Fleming in Der Rosenkavalier. Women who had commanded stages, whose voices had moved thousands. Amara's own voice had never touched a professional stage. She'd sung in church basements and community centers, at weddings for friends who couldn't afford real entertainment, in her shower where the acoustics made her sound almost magnificent, but never where it counted. She pulled herself from bed and made coffee in the French press her mother had given her before she died. The conservatory rejection letter was still magneted to her refrigerator, 3rd one in 3 years. "We regret to inform you, not the right fit for our program at this time. We encourage you to continue your musical journey." Code words. She'd learned to translate them. "You're talented, but you're black and poor, and we have quotas we pretend don't exist." Amara practiced scales while the coffee brewed, her voice warming up through the register. C major, D major, A major. Her neighbors had stopped complaining years ago. Now they just knocked on the walls in appreciation when she hit the high notes. She worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a cafe in Midtown, Afternoons doing data entry for a medical billing company. Evenings catering events like tonight's gala. The Chen Foundation paid double for their staff. Elite events demanded elite discretion. Amara ironed her white shirt with meticulous care, pressing each crease until it was sharp enough to cut. The shirt was armor. The uniform was a mask. When she wore it, she became invisible, and invisibility meant safety. It meant rent paid on time. It meant survival, but it also meant silence. Fan's silence was the only thing that had ever truly frightened her. She looked at herself in the mirror. 28 years old, dark skin that glowed warm in the morning light, eyes that held too much knowledge of how the world worked, hands that had scrubbed floors and served champagne and played invisible piano keys on table edges, always moving to music only she could hear. Her mother used to say, "Your gift doesn't need their permission, baby. It just needs your courage." Amara had courage. She just wasn't sure where to aim it anymore. She finished dressing, grabbed her keys, and headed for the subway. The gala started at 7. She needed to be there by 5 to prep. 4 hours on her feet, carrying trays, smiling politely, disappearing the moment someone needed something. Just another night of being invisible. She had no idea that before midnight, everything would shatter. The Grandview Ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Amara arrived through the service entrance, where staff clustered in the industrial kitchen, straightening bow ties and smoothing aprons. The catering manager, a perpetually stressed woman named Rita, handed out assignments with military efficiency. "Amara, you're on champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Main floor, west quadrant. Stay alert, stay polite, stay invisible. These people donate millions. Treat them like royalty." "Always do," Amara murmured. By 7, the ballroom filled with guests who moved in clouds of expensive perfume and self-importance. Amara recognized faces from magazines and news broadcasts. Tech entrepreneurs, hedge fund managers, Broadway producers, people who shaped culture from positions of unassailable power. She circulated with her tray, offering smoked salmon blinis and caviar-topped crostini. Conversations washed over her. Stock portfolios, upcoming productions at Lincoln Center, summer homes in the Hamptons. This was her world in a way. They discussed opera and symphonies, Puccini and Verdi, the decline of arts education and the importance of preserving classical tradition. Her world, but not her place. Near the champagne fountain, a group of women had formed a tight circle, their laughter sharp and exclusive. Vivian Harlow stood at the center, holding court like a queen. Her burgundy dress probably cost more than Amara made in 6 months. Her pearls gleamed under the chandeliers. "The problem," Vivian was saying, her voice carrying, "is that standards have simply collapsed. Everyone thinks they deserve access to high culture now. It used to mean something to attend the opera. Now it's all diversity initiatives and community outreach." She said the words like they tasted bitter. One of the other women nodded. "It dilutes the art form. Some people simply aren't raised with an appreciation for refinement." Amara's grip tightened on her tray. She told herself to move on, to let it slide. But her feet stayed planted. Vivian's eyes landed on her. "You there?" More champagne. Amara approached, lifting a fresh flute from her tray. As she extended it, Vivian leaned back slightly, her nose wrinkling. "Do you even understand what we're celebrating here tonight?" Vivian's tone was saccharine and poisonous. "Culture, art, refinement." She took the champagne glass with 2 fingers, holding it away from her body. "Though I suppose that's rather abstract for someone in your position," the other women tittered. Amara felt heat crawl up her spine. "I understand perfectly, Mum." Her voice stayed level. "How lovely that you can read the program." Vivian turned to her companions. "The quality of staff has really declined, hasn't it? I mentioned it to Marcus earlier. I suppose we should be grateful they showed up at all." Amara's breath came shallow. She should walk away. She needed this job. But something in Vivian's eyes, that casual cruelty, that absolute certainty that she could say anything without consequence, made Amara's jaw lock. She started to turn. Vivienne's hand moved with deliberate precision. The champagne glass tipped, and golden liquid arced through the air, splashing across Amara's white shirt. Cold and shocking. The stain spread like blood. The conversations around them died. 50 faces turned toward the champagne fountain. Vivienne's mouth formed shocked innocence. "Oh my goodness! How clumsy of me!" Her eyes glittered with something that looked like satisfaction. "Perhaps you should stick to simpler work, dear. Something more suited to your capabilities. Clearly fine dining is a bit beyond your skill set." Laughter rippled through the nearby guests. Not everyone. Some looked uncomfortable, glancing away. But enough. Enough to make the humiliation complete. Amara stood frozen, champagne soaking through her shirt to her skin. Her hands trembled. Her throat closed. This was the moment. The moment she was supposed to apologize, to duck her head, to vanish into the service corridors and change her shirt and come back out smiling, pretending nothing had happened. That was the script. That was survival. But Vivienne's smile, satisfied and cruel and utterly certain of her power, sparked something in Amara's chest. A fury, a grief, a lifetime of silence demanding to be broken. She looked up at the chandeliers, the painted ceiling, the oil portraits of dead composers. Her mother's voice whispered through memory. "That could be you someday." Amara took a breath. Her shoulders straightened. She met Vivienne's eyes, and she began to sing. The first note emerged pure and unexpected, cutting through the ballroom silence like light through dark water. Nessun dorma. The opening phrase of Puccini's aria, traditionally sung by tenors, now transformed by Amara's soprano voice into something entirely her own. Time fractured. The chandeliers above seemed to pulse with the sound. Vivienne's smile froze, confusion flooding her features. The guests nearest to them stopped moving, champagne flutes suspended halfway to lips. Amara's voice climbed higher. The Italian syllables rolled off her tongue with perfect diction. She'd taught herself pronunciation from YouTube videos and library recordings, spending hours mouthing words until they felt natural. Nessun dorma. Te pure o principessa. She wasn't thinking anymore, wasn't calculating. Her voice simply poured out, carrying everything she'd kept locked inside. Every rejection letter, every time someone had looked through her as if she were glass, every moment she'd bitten her tongue and swallowed her rage and smiled politely while being dismissed. The champagne stains spread across her shirt. She could feel it cold against her skin, but she didn't look down. She kept her eyes fixed on the crystal chandelier above, imagining her voice climbing toward it, filling the massive space. Her mother's face rose in her memory, sitting in the balcony of the Metropolitan Opera House, where she'd worked as a cleaning woman. Amara had been 8 years old, small enough to sneak in after hours. They'd watched from the highest seats as a soprano rehearsed La Bohème. Her mother had squeezed her hand and whispered, "That could be you someday, baby. Your voice is a gift." But gifts meant nothing without doors, and all the doors had been locked until now. Until this moment. Until she'd stopped asking permission and simply taken the space she'd been denied. Amara's voice soared through the climax of the aria. "Vincerò, vincerò, vincerò. I will win. I will win. I will win." The final note hung in the air, sustained and pure, resonating off marble and gold leaf. Then silence. Absolute silence. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. Reality crashed back. She'd just sung opera at a catering gig. She'd made herself visible when invisibility was the only protection she had. She'd broken every rule. But God, it had felt like breathing after years underwater. Amara had been 8 years old the first time she understood what her voice could do. Her mother, Janet, cleaned office buildings and opera houses, working overnight shifts that left her exhausted, but strangely content. "I get to be around beauty," she'd say. "Even if I'm just scrubbing the floors, I'm in the same room where magic happens." One night, Janet brought Amara to work. They weren't supposed to be there. Children weren't allowed in the opera house after hours. But Janet's regular babysitter had cancelled, and she couldn't afford to miss a shift. So Amara sat in the highest balcony seat, homework spread across her lap, while her mother mopped the stage far below. A soprano arrived early for rehearsal. Amara watched her warm up, voice scales echoing through the empty space. Then she began O mio babbino caro, and the entire opera house transformed. The music wrapped around Amara like arms, like safety, like belonging. When the soprano finished, Amara, without thinking, began humming the melody. Her mother looked up from her mop. The soprano stopped in the middle of the stage, tilting her head. "Sing it properly, sweetheart," the soprano called up. "Don't be shy," Amara sang. The words were in Italian, which she didn't understand yet, but she mimicked the sounds perfectly. Her voice, small and untrained but achingly pure, filled the opera house. The soprano's face shifted. She climbed the stairs to the balcony, all 5 tiers, until she stood before Amara. "How old are you?" 8. "Have you had training?" "No, ma'am." The soprano looked at Janet. "Your daughter has a gift. A real gift. You need to get her into a program. But programs cost money. Conservatories required auditions, connections, resources they didn't have." Janet worked 3 jobs. They lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens, with walls so thin you could hear neighbors' conversations. There was no money for voice lessons, for coaching, for the ecosystem of privilege that surrounded classical music. So Amara taught herself. She watched videos online, studied recordings from the library, practiced in their apartment until neighbors complained or applauded, depending on the day. She learned Italian and German and French from lyric translations. She trained her ear to hear the microscopic differences between great and transcendent. At 18, she auditioned for Juilliard. The panel listened with stone faces. "Thank you. We'll be in touch." The rejection letter arrived 3 weeks later. Not the right fit. She tried again at 22. Manhattan School of Music. Same result. At 25, she auditioned for a regional conservatory program with a reputation for being more accessible. The director told her afterward, in a tone that tried for kindness, "You have raw talent, but your technique needs refinement." And frankly, the classical music world is very traditional. You might find more success in other genres. Translation: you're talented, but you're black and poor, and we don't know what to do with you. Her mother died 6 months later. Stroke sudden and devastating. Her last words to Amara: "Don't let them make you small, baby. Your voice is your truth. They don't get to take that." Now Amara was 28. She worked catering jobs and data entry and cafe shifts. She sang in her shower and her apartment, and occasionally at church. She'd learned to be invisible, because visibility meant risking more rejection, more closed doors, more polite dismissals. But tonight, drenched in champagne and humiliation, she'd become visible anyway, and something about it felt like keeping a promise to her mother. The final note of Nessun Dorma faded into the ballroom's silence. Amara's chest heaved. Her throat felt raw, opened up. She slowly lowered her gaze from the chandelier to the crowd around her. Vivian Harlow stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and something that might have been fear. The other guests stared, some with mouths open, others with hands pressed to their chests. A woman near the back had tears streaming down her face. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single pair of hands began to clap. The sound broke the spell. Applause erupted, thunderous and disbelieving. Guests surged forward, surrounding Amara. A man in a tuxedo grabbed her hand. "Where did you train?" "That was extraordinary. Are you performing anywhere?" "I need to hear you again. My God, your technique." Amara's head spun. This wasn't real. This was a dream. A hallucination brought on by stress and humiliation. She took a step back, nearly tripping over her own feet. "Give her space." The voice cut through the chaos, quiet but absolute in its authority. The crowd parted. A man in an impeccably tailored black suit moved through the guests with the ease of someone who'd spent his life commanding rooms. Marcus Chen, billionaire CEO and founder of the Chen Foundation. Amara recognized him from the Gala programs. He was the reason tonight existed, the reason 500 wealthy people had gathered to donate to arts education. He stopped in front of her. He was perhaps 50, with silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard-won wisdom. But what struck Amara most was his expression. He was crying. Tears ran down his face unchecked. He didn't bother wiping them away. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" His voice fractured on the last word. Amara's throat closed. "I taught myself mostly. Conservatory. They rejected me 3 times. Something crossed Marcus's face, pain so sharp it looked physical. He nodded slowly as if confirming something he'd already known. Then he turned to Vivian, who stood pale and rigid at the edge of the circle. "Mrs. Harlow?" His voice stayed quiet, but carried an edge that made several guests flinch. "I believe you owe this woman an apology." Vivian's mouth opened and closed. This is absurd. She's the most gifted vocalist I've heard in 20 years. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "And you deliberately humiliated her because she was serving champagne instead of performing, because you assumed someone in a server's uniform couldn't possibly possess artistry, because you saw her as less than human." The ballroom had gone silent again, every eye fixed on Vivian, her face flushed deep red. "Mr. Chen, I think you're overreacting. Apologize now, or leave my event and never return." Vivian's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Amara thought she might actually do it, might actually offer some grudging apology. But then Vivian's expression hardened into contempt. "I will not be spoken to this way." She grabbed her clutch purse and turned on her heel, stalking toward the exit. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. The doors closed behind her with a soft click. Marcus turned back to Amara. His tears hadn't stopped. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's not your fault, isn't it?" He smiled, but it was the saddest expression Amara had ever seen. "I created this event. I invited these people. I built a foundation meant to support artists, and yet women like you are still serving champagne instead of performing on stage." He took a breath. "You remind me of someone." "My daughter," Amara's heart stuttered. "Your daughter?" "She sang like you. That same fire. That same—" He closed his eyes. "I need to speak with you. After the gala, please, will you stay?" It wasn't a command. It was a plea. Amara nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus touched her shoulder gently, then turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. Please continue enjoying the evening. We have important work to do tonight, supporting the next generation of artists. Let's make sure we do it right." The crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed, excited tones. Several guests approached Amara with business cards, phone numbers, invitations to audition. She took them numbly, her mind still fixed on Marcus's face. She sang like you, past tense. What had happened to his daughter? The gala stretched on for 3 more hours. Amara moved through it in a daze, no longer carrying trays. Rita had taken one look at her champagne-stained shirt and told her to take the rest of the night off. But Amara didn't leave. She stayed in the service corridor, watching through the doorway as guests danced and donated, and discussed the unexpected performance. Several times, she caught Marcus watching her from across the ballroom. His expression never changed. Grief and recognition tangled together. By 11, the crowd had thinned. Staff began breaking down tables, collecting abandoned champagne flutes. Marcus appeared in the doorway of the service corridor. "Walk with me?" They moved through the empty hallways of the Grandview Hotel until they reached a small terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool. Traffic sounds drifted up from far below. Marcus leaned against the railing, his shoulders hunched. My daughter's name was Lily, he said without preamble. Lily Chen. She was brilliant, funny, kind, and she had a voice that could make you believe in heaven. He pulled out his phone, showed Amara a photo. A young woman with her father's eyes sitting at a piano, laughing at something off camera. She wanted to be an opera singer more than anything. She trained from age 7, had a private coach, went to performing arts high school, sang in youth symphonies. At 17, she auditioned for Juilliard's vocal performance program. Marcus's voice cracked. They rejected her. Amara's stomach dropped. Why? The official reason? Her technique needed refinement. But the real reason? He met her eyes. She was Chinese-American. Classical music has very specific ideas about who belongs. They saw her last name and her face and decided she didn't fit their image of an opera singer. Never mind that her Italian pronunciation was flawless. Never mind that she could hit a high C that would make angels weep. What happened? She tried other schools. Got into a decent program in Boston, but it wasn't what she'd dreamed of. She felt like a failure. Like she wasn't good enough. Marcus's hands gripped the railing. I told her it didn't matter. That she was talented and would find her way. But she'd internalized the rejection. Started doubting herself. Stopped singing. The city glittered below them, indifferent and beautiful. 3 months after the rejection letter, she took her own life. Marcus's voice barely rose above a whisper. Pills. Her roommate found her. The note said she was tired of not being enough. Tired of fighting to belong in a world that didn't want her. Tears blurred Amara's vision. Mr. Chen, Marcus, please, Marcus. I'm so sorry. He wiped his eyes roughly. I built this foundation because of her. Tried to change the system that killed her. Poured millions into arts education, diversity initiatives, scholarships for underrepresented students. But when I saw you tonight, saw you serving champagne in a room full of donors discussing the importance of supporting artists, I realized how little has actually changed. He turned to face her. You have the gift Lily had, and you've been teaching yourself, because no one would open the door. How many more Lilies are out there? How many voices are we losing? Amara's throat ached. I almost gave up. So many times. Why didn't you? My mother. She died last year, but before she did, she made me promise not to let them make me small. To keep singing even if no one listened. Amara looked down at her champagne-stained shirt. Tonight was the first time I broke that promise. I made myself invisible because I needed the paycheck. And then you became visible anyway. I got angry and tired, and I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Good. Anger is useful. Silence is what they want. They want you serving champagne instead of performing arias, because if you perform, you force them to acknowledge their own prejudices. He straightened. I want to help you, not as charity, as restitution for what this world did to you and to Lily, and to everyone like you. Amara's heart hammered. What kind of help? I'm organizing a private concert in 3 weeks. 50 guests, foundation donors, conservatory board members, music critics. I want you to perform, not as a curiosity, not as a diversity checkbox, as the artist you are. He pulled out a business card, my personal number. Think about it. If you say yes, we'll get you a coach, a pianist, whatever you need. You'll sing as yourself, for Lily, for your mother, for every voice that was told to stay quiet. Amara took the card with shaking hands. This was the door that had been locked her entire life. This was the opportunity that rejection letters had trained her to never expect. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Marcus's eyes filled again. Because I was too late to save my daughter. But maybe I'm not too late to save her voice. It lives in people like you. And I'll be damned if I let the world silence it again. He touched her shoulder gently, then walked back inside, leaving Amara alone on the terrace with the city spread below her, and possibility crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Amara stayed on the terrace for a long time after Marcus left, his business card pressed between her palms like a talisman. The city noise rose and fell, sirens, horns, distant music. She thought about Lily Chen, brilliant and broken, about her mother, scrubbing floors in opera houses, about the 3 rejection letters on her refrigerator, and the voice she'd taught herself to contain. The terrace door opened. Marcus appeared again, his face pale in the dim light. "I need to show you something," he said, "before you decide." He led her through the hotel corridors to a private elevator. They rode in silence to the penthouse floor. Marcus's suite was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, furniture that probably cost more than Amara's yearly salary. But he walked past it all to a closed door at the end of the hallway. "This was going to be Lily's room," he said quietly. "When she visited from Boston, I kept it ready for her. After she died, I couldn't change it." He opened the door. The room was frozen in time. A twin bed with a lavender comforter. Posters of opera singers on the walls. Maria Callas, Jessie Norman, Angela Gheorghiu. A keyboard in the corner. Sheet music scattered across a desk. And everywhere photographs. Lily at voice recitals. Lily laughing with friends. Lily on stage in a high school production, face radiant with joy. Marcus walked to the desk and picked up a frame. This was taken the day she got the Juilliard rejection letter. Her roommate didn't know. Took the photo because Lily was smiling. She smiled until she was alone. Then she fell apart. In the photo, Lily stood outside a stone building, letter in hand, her smile bright and brittle. Her eyes held something desperate. "I look at this every day," Marcus whispered, "and I wonder what I could have done differently. If I'd fought harder, if I'd told her the right things, if I'd—" His voice broke completely. "If I'd made her understand that her worth wasn't determined by their acceptance." Amara's vision blurred. She reached out, touching the photograph gently. Marcus set the frame down and turned to her. "I'm not asking you to replace her. No one could. But I'm asking you to do what she couldn't. To sing when they tell you to be quiet. To take up space when they want you invisible. To prove that talent doesn't need their permission." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This is a contract. 3 weeks of coaching with the best vocal instructor in New York. A pianist, wardrobe, everything you need for the performance. And afterward, regardless of what happens, a year of full funding to pursue your career. Enough to quit your other jobs. Enough to focus entirely on your voice." Amara took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why?" "Because Lily would have wanted this. And because I'm trying to save voices instead of silencing them, even if I have to do it one artist at a time." His eyes held hers. "You don't have to decide tonight. Think about it. But know that if you say yes, you're not just singing for yourself. You're singing for everyone who was told they didn't belong." Amara clutched the envelope. Behind Marcus, Lily smiled from a dozen photographs, frozen at 17, forever caught between joy and despair. "I'll do it," Amara whispered. "For her, for my mother, for all of us." Marcus exhaled, something like relief flooding his features. "Thank you. God, thank you." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's one thing you should know. Vivian Harlow sits on the board of 3 major conservatories. She has influence, power. When she finds out about the concert, and she will, she'll try to sabotage it. She'll call in favors, spread rumors, do everything she can to make sure you fail." Amara's stomach clenched. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to be prepared. Because the world doesn't change easily, and people like Vivian fight to keep things exactly as they are." He met her eyes. "But you have something she doesn't. You have a voice that can make billionaires cry. You have the truth. And in the end, that matters more than all her power." He left her standing in Lily's room, surrounded by photographs of a girl who dreamed of opera houses and died believing she wasn't enough. Amara looked down at the envelope in her hands. The contract that could change everything. The opportunity that came wrapped in grief and waited with the memory of a voice silenced too soon. Outside the window, the city glittered. Somewhere in those lights, stages waited. And somewhere in her chest, her mother's voice whispered, "Your gift doesn't need their permission, baby." Amara pressed the envelope to her heart. 3 weeks until the concert. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks until she'd stand on a stage and sing not as a waitress who got lucky, but as an artist who refused to be erased. She thought of Lily's smile in that photograph, bright and breaking. This time, the ending would be different. Amara woke at dawn in her studio apartment. The contract spread across her kitchen table like evidence of a dream. She read it 3 times, checking for hidden clauses, for tricks, for the moment when the door would slam shut again. But it was real. Marcus Chen's signature at the bottom. 3 weeks of professional coaching. A performance. A year of funding. She should have felt elated. Instead, she felt terrified. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rita, the catering manager. Heard what happened at the gala. Don't bother coming back. We can't have staff making scenes. Amara stared at the message. She'd lost her highest-paying job. The cafe wouldn't cover rent. The data entry barely paid for groceries. She had 2 weeks until the first of the month, and her bank account held $347. Another text, this one from an unknown number. This is Vivian Harlow. I know what Marcus is planning. You're making a mistake. Classical music has standards. You'll humiliate yourself. Amara's hands shook. She set the phone down, face down, but the words burned in her mind. You'll humiliate yourself. The same doubt that had lived inside her since the first rejection letter. The voice that whispered she wasn't good enough, would never be good enough, was fooling herself by even trying. She walked to her refrigerator and looked at the rejection letters. 3 of them, each worded slightly differently, but carrying the same message. Not the right fit. She'd kept them as reminders, as proof that the world was what she thought it was, but her mother's voice rose through memory, clearer than it had been in months. Your voice is your truth, baby. They don't get to take that. Amara pulled down the rejection letters one by one. She held them over the kitchen sink and lit them with a match, watching the paper curl and blacken. The smoke alarm shrieked. She waved it away with a dish towel, laughing and crying simultaneously. When the ashes cooled, she flushed them down the drain. Then she picked up her phone and texted Marcus. When do we start? The vocal coach's studio occupied the top floor of a brownstone in the West Village. Amara arrived 15 minutes early, clutching the address Marcus had sent. A woman in her 60s answered the door, petite, with silver hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. Amara. I'm Catherine Reeves. Come in. The studio was beautiful. Hardwood floors, a grand piano by the window, walls lined with photographs of Catherine with famous singers. Placido Domingo, René Fleming, Joyce Di Donato. This woman had trained legends. Catherine gestured to a chair. Marcus sent me the video from the gala. You have raw talent, possibly extraordinary talent, but raw talent isn't enough for what we're attempting. You have 3 weeks to refine technique that usually takes years. We're going to work harder than you've ever worked. Understood? Amara nodded, throat tight. Good, sing for me. O mio babino caro. The piece you learned as a child, Amara sang. Catherine listened with closed eyes, occasionally lifting a finger to mark a phrase. When Amara finished, Catherine opened her eyes. You're self-taught. Yes, ma'am. It shows. Your breath support is inconsistent. You're singing from your throat instead of your diaphragm. Your vowels are shaped incorrectly on the high notes. Catherine stood and walked to the piano. But your musicality is instinctive. You understand the emotional arc of the piece. Most singers take years to develop that. You were born with it. Hope flickered in Amara's chest. Can you fix the technical issues? In 3 weeks. We can improve them significantly. Perfection isn't the goal. Truth is, Catherine began playing scales. Marcus told me about his daughter. About Lily. I actually heard her sing once at a youth competition. She was remarkable. Her death was a tragedy that should never have happened. He wants me to sing for her. He wants you to sing for yourself. For Lily. For everyone who's been rejected by a system that values pedigree over passion. Catherine's hands moved over the keys. But here's what you need to understand, Amara. When you step onto that stage, you won't just be performing. You'll be threatening a power structure that's existed for centuries. Classical music has always been gatekept by wealthy white institutions. Your voice, your black, self-taught, undeniable voice, challenges everything they believe about who deserves to make art. Amara's stomach clenched. Vivian already texted me. She said I'll humiliate myself. Good, that means she's afraid. Catherine smiled. Fear makes people vicious. Expect more of it, but also expect this. When you sing the way you're capable of singing, when you stand on that stage and refuse to be diminished, you'll give voice to everyone who's been silenced. That's power they can't take away. For 3 weeks they worked, 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. Catherine rebuilt Amara's technique from the ground up. Breath support, vowel placement, registration transitions. She taught her to sing from her core, to let the sound resonate through her entire body. They worked on 4 arias, O mio babino caro, Nessun dorma, Visi d'arte, and one piece Catherine insisted on, Summertime from Porgy and Bess. Your heritage matters, Catherine said. Don't hide it. Celebrate it. The pianist Marcus hired was a gentleman named David, who treated each rehearsal like a collaboration. He adjusted tempos to match Amara's phrasing, supported her when she struggled with difficult passages, celebrated when she nailed a complicated run. But the hardest part wasn't the technique. It was the emotional exposure. Catherine made her dig into the meaning of each aria to connect the music to her own life. Visi d'arte became about her mother's sacrifices. Nessun dorma became about defiance in the face of rejection. Each song carved her open, left her raw. On the 19th day, Catherine stopped her mid-phrase. What are you afraid of? Amara's breath caught. Failing. Proving them right. Wrong, you're afraid of succeeding, because if you succeed, you can never hide again. You'll have to keep being visible, keep fighting, keep taking up space. Catherine's eyes softened. That's exhausting. I understand, but it's also your responsibility. Once you show people what's possible, you can't unsee it. Neither can they. Amara sat at the piano bench, hands shaking. What if I'm not strong enough? Lily wasn't weak. Your mother wasn't weak. They were crushed by a system designed to crush people like them. Like you. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. But you have something they didn't. You have this moment. This chance. Don't waste it by being afraid of your own power. On the 21st day, Catherine declared her ready. You'll never be perfect. No one is, but you're truthful. And that's what matters. The concert was tomorrow night. The concert hall was intimate, only 50 seats arranged in a semicircle around a small stage. Deep burgundy curtains, gold accents, lighting designed to make performers look like they were glowing. Amara stood backstage in an emerald green gown that Marcus had insisted on, her hands ice cold. Catherine appeared beside her. Breathe. From your diaphragm. I can't do this. Yes, you can. And you will. Catherine turned her to face a mirror. Look at yourself. Really look. Amara stared at her reflection. The emerald gown made her skin luminous. Her hair was styled in natural curls that framed her face. She looked like someone who belonged on a stage. But the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. I see a woman who taught herself opera from YouTube videos, Catherine said quietly, who survived rejection and poverty and the death of her mother and still kept singing, who stood in a ballroom soaked in champagne and refused to be silent. That woman is not afraid of 50 people in an audience. What if Vivian's right? What if I humiliate myself? Then you humiliate yourself, and you'll survive that too. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. Catherine squeezed her hand. Lily couldn't do this. She believed their lies about her worth. You don't have to make that mistake. You know who you are. The stage manager appeared. 5 minutes, Miss Adams. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. She walked to the edge of the curtain and peered through the gap. The seats were filling. She recognized several faces from the gala, donors, critics, and there in the third row Vivian Harlow sat with her arms crossed, her expression cold and expectant. Marcus sat in the front row, the seat beside him empty. Lily's seat. A single white rose lay across the velvet cushion. Amara closed her eyes. She thought of her mother in the opera house balcony, of Lily's photographs frozen in time, of every voice that had been told it didn't matter. The stage manager touched her shoulder. It's time. The curtain rose. The audience quieted. Amara stepped into the light. For a moment she couldn't move. 50 faces stared at her. The lights were hot. The silence was absolute. She found Marcus in the front row. He nodded once, tears already streaming down his face. David began playing. The opening notes of O mio bambino caro, the aria from her childhood, from the moment she first understood what her voice could do. Amara sang. The first phrase emerged tentative, careful. But by the second line, muscle memory took over. Catherine's training, 3 weeks of relentless work, the lifetime of practice in her apartment, it all converged. Her voice opened up, full and clear, carrying the longing and desperation of Puccini's music. O mio bambino caro. Mi piace, è bello, bello. Oh, my beloved father. I love him, he is beautiful, beautiful. She wasn't just singing words, she was pouring out her heart. The aria became a prayer for her mother, for Lily, for herself. The technique Catherine had drilled into her made the sound effortless, but the emotion was entirely her own. In the third row, Vivian's expression shifted. The cold certainty cracked. She leaned forward, listening. Amara finished the piece. Brief silence. Then applause, genuine, stunned. But Marcus raised a hand, asking for quiet. The next piece, Nessun Dorma. The aria she'd sung at the gala, now refined and powerful. Her voice climbed through the difficult phrases with confidence, hitting the high notes with crystalline precision. Vincerò, vincerò, vincerò. A woman in the audience gasped. A critic in the back row scribbled frantically in a notebook. Next, Visi date from Tosca, the aria of a woman asking why God has abandoned her after a lifetime of devotion. Amara sang it thinking of her mother's sacrifices, the floors scrubbed and the dreams deferred. Her voice broke on certain phrases, deliberately, emotionally. Not a technical flaw, but a choice. Catherine had taught her that perfection wasn't always truth. By the final phrase, half the audience was crying. Marcus sobbed openly, his hand on the white rose beside him. Last piece. Summertime. Amara transitioned from Italian to English, from European opera to American musical theatre. The Gershwin lullaby, written for black voices, reclaimed by a black woman who'd been told she didn't belong in classical music. Her voice wrapped around the familiar melody, making it both tender and defiant. Summertime and the living is easy. She sang the final line, looking directly at Vivian. You're gonna rise up singing, then you'll spread your wings. The last note faded. Complete silence. Then chaos. The entire audience rose to their feet. Applause crashed through the small space like a wave. The critic shouted, "Brava!" A board member from Juilliard wiped tears from his eyes, and Vivian Harlow sat frozen, her face a mask of something between awe and devastation. Backstage, Amara collapsed into a chair, adrenaline draining from her body like water. Catherine appeared with water, David with a towel for her sweat-soaked face. "You were transcendent," Catherine whispered. "Absolutely transcendent." Before Amara could respond, there was a knock at the door. The Juilliard board member entered, Dr. Patricia Whitmore, a black woman in her 50s with kind eyes. "Ms. Adams? May I have a moment?" Amara stood, legs shaking. "Of course. I was on the panel that rejected your application 3 years ago." Dr. Whitmore's voice was steady but pained. "I want to apologize. Your talent was undeniable even then, but I allowed other voices on the committee to override my judgment. They said you needed more refinement. I knew what they meant. I should have fought harder." She extended an envelope. This is an official invitation to audition again, with a full scholarship already approved pending your acceptance. We're trying to change. It's slow, but we're trying. Amara took the envelope with trembling hands. Why now? Because tonight you proved what I already knew. That talent doesn't require permission, and that we've been closing doors on voices we desperately need. Dr. Whitmore squeezed her hand. I hope you'll give us another chance, but I'll understand if you don't. She left. Amara stared at the envelope. The door that had been locked now open. Marcus appeared next, his face streaked with tears. He held the white rose from Lily's seat. She would have loved you. God, she would have been so proud. He pressed the rose into Amara's hands. Thank you. For doing what she couldn't. For singing when they told you to be quiet. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. Maybe not today. Maybe not in this room. But eventually your voice would have found its way out. Voices like yours always do. He smiled. The funding starts immediately. Catherine has agreed to continue coaching you. You have options now. More than you've ever had. Use them wisely. The last visitor was unexpected. Vivienne Harlow stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Amara tensed. I owe you an apology, Vivienne said quietly. What I did at the gala was inexcusable. What I said was cruel and racist and born from a lifetime of believing that people who looked like me deserved access to beauty, and people who looked like you didn't. She took a breath. Tonight you shattered that belief. Your voice is extraordinary, and I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong, Amara stared. Why are you telling me this? Because I sit on 3 conservatory boards, and I've been using my influence to keep people like you out. I justified it as maintaining standards. But tonight showed me what I've really been maintaining. A system of exclusion. I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I can stop causing more. Vivienne's eyes filled. I'm resigning from 2 of the boards. The 3rd I'll stay on to advocate for change. It won't fix anything, but it's a start. She turned to leave, then paused. Your mother would be proud. I can see her in you. In your strength. After she left, Amara sat alone in the dressing room, holding Lily's white rose and the Juilliard envelope. 6 hours ago she'd been terrified. Now she had doors opening that she'd thought were closed forever. But the most important door was the one inside herself, the one that had kept her voice locked away, told her to stay small, to stay safe, to stay invisible. That door was gone, shattered by 3 weeks of work and 1 night of truth. She looked at herself in the mirror. The emerald gown. The confident woman staring back. This was who she'd always been, under the uniforms and the fear. I did it, Mama, she whispered. I kept singing. 6 months later, Amara stood in the wings of the Metropolitan Opera House waiting for her cue. She wore a ruby-red gown for her debut as Musetta in La Bohème, the same opera house where her mother had mopped floors, the same stage she'd dreamed of as a child. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra swelled. Amara stepped into the spotlight. The audience was massive, thousands of faces looking up from the orchestra and balconies. In the front row, Marcus sat beside Catherine and David. Behind them, Dr. Whitmore from Juilliard. And scattered throughout the audience, people who'd heard about the waitress who sang at the gala, who'd watched viral videos of her concert, who'd come to see if the story was real. Amara opened her mouth and sang. The music poured out of her, effortless and true. She moved through the role with confidence, hitting every note, nailing every phrase. But more than technical perfection, she brought truth. The character's joy and heartbreak, her defiance and vulnerability. Amara understood them intimately. During intermission, she returned to her dressing room and found a letter waiting. The handwriting was shaky but determined. Dear Amara, I'm 16 years old and black and I want to be an opera singer. Everyone tells me to pick something more realistic. I was going to give up. Then I saw the video of you at the gala. I'm not giving up anymore. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Maya Amara pressed the letter to her chest. This was why. Not the stage or the acclaim or the opened doors. This, the girl who wouldn't give up. the voice that wouldn't be silenced. She thought about Lily Chen, whose voice had been stolen by a system too cruel and narrow to hold her. About her mother, who'd scrubbed floors so Amara could dream. About every artist who'd been told they didn't belong, who'd internalized the lie, who'd stopped singing. The system hadn't changed overnight. Vivienne was one person on one board. Juilliard was one school offering one scholarship. The barriers were still massive, still gate-kept by wealth and privilege and centuries of exclusion. But Amara was here, on this stage, in this moment. Her voice filling the opera house where her mother had once worked, invisible and unheard. That was something. That was a crack in the wall, and cracks, given time and pressure, could bring down entire structures. The stage manager called her back. Second act. Amara stood and checked her reflection one final time. She looked strong. She looked like she belonged because she did, not because anyone gave her permission, but because her voice, raw and trained, powerful and true, had always deserved to be heard. She walked back to the wings. The orchestra began. The stage lights came up, golden and warm. Amara stepped into them without hesitation, without fear, without apology, and she sang. Your voice is not a gift they can give you. It's a truth they can never take away.